guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we will be participating in the SSA Student Summit in the cloud track, and we'll be starting with our first code lab, which is deploying a compute engine instance with a remote startup script. So let's get right into this. We are at the SSA Student Summit homepage. Let's head over to the cloud track, intermediate. Sign in. Alright, let's go to our first code lab. Deploy a compute instance with a remote startup script. Alright, so let's see what is required of us in this lab. Confirm that a Google Cloud storage bucket exists that contains a file. Confirm that a compute instance has been created that has a remote startup script called install-web.sh configured. So take note of the name. Confirm that a HTTP access firewall rule exists with tag that applies to that virtual machine. And then connect to the server IP address using HTTP and get a non-error response. Okay. So before we click on Start Lab, let's just read through the instructions quick. Introduction, you can go through this. Yeah, so make sure you read the instructions. So challenge scenario. You have been given the responsibility of managing the configuration of your organization's Google Cloud virtual machines. You have decided to make some changes to the framework used for managing the deployment and configuration machines. You want to make it easier to modify the startup scripts used to initialize a number of the compute instances. Instead of storing startup scripts directly in the instances metadata, you have decided to store the scripts in the cloud storage bucket and then configure the virtual machines to point to the relevant script file in the bucket. Yeah, it makes sense to use a cloud storage bucket so that you can create or deploy virtual machines at scale with already pre-configured software. Like in our case, our Apache web server is going to be our pre-installed package. So basic bash script that installs the Apache web server software called install-web.sh has been provided for you as a sample startup script. You can download this from the student resources links on the left side of the page. So your challenge: configure a Linux compute engine instance that installs the Apache web server software using a remote startup script. In order to confirm that a compute instance Apache has successfully installed, the compute engine instance must be accessible via HTTP from the internet. In order to ensure accurate activity tracking, you should not modify or change any of the pre-created lab resources, in particular the lab monitor compute engine instance. Okay, so here are some tips and tricks. We can use this. Configure instance metadata. So the running startup scripts documentation page explains how compute engine instance metadata can be used to configure startup scripts. So let's make use of the documentation. Check if your compute engine instance is executing the startup script. Use the serial console for running virtual machines to look at startup events to make sure that the startup script is being executed. So they say use the serial console for the running virtual machine to look at the startup events to make sure that the startup script is being executed. check permissions. Your compute engine instance might not have the correct permissions required to read the startup script from the storage bucket. The virtual machine needs to be given permissions that align with the storage permissions. Check firewalls. If the startup script has installed the software, you may be unable to connect if a firewall has not been correctly configured. Check the URL and address. You'll be able to connect to the Apache web server if you are trying to access the compute engine instance using an HTTPS address rather than HTTP, or you're using the incorrect IP address. So check that your URL is this one rather than HTTPS. Okay, so okay, we can start this. Let's begin. Okay, we're going to open this in an incognito window. Let's get the password. Okay, we're in our console. Alright, so let's check documentation for running startup scripts real quick. So here's what we want. Pass a startup script from cloud storage, Linux VMs. So select this one. Okay. So here we have a sample bash file, but we have already been provided with one. So let's check that out. Let's agree here. Agree and continue. Alright. So let's download our sample startup script. Resources -install -web, but remember this, the name here was install-web, so let's edit that. Make sure you have the exact name. Alright, we have our script downloaded. Now let's proceed to create our cloud storage bucket. Then we upload our bash script as an object in that bucket. So let's go to cloud storage buckets. Okay, create. We need a globally unique name here for our bucket, so I'm just going to use the name of our GCP project ID. So using the GCP project ID, it's globally unique. So just accept all the defaults here. So public access prevention is on. Create. Confirm public access prevention. For security purposes, we only need to access our bucket internally using internal resources, so that's better. Okay, now we can upload files, and here's our script we downloaded. Okay, I can just open this script so you see what's inside. Yes, so it's just yeah, installs the Apache server, web server. So all right, let's our bucket is created. Bucket is created. Now let's upload files in our bucket. We did that already. We uploaded our script. So let's get some information from this script. We can use the URI, which uses GSP, or we can use the authenticated URL. But since this bucket is private, let's go ahead and use the second option, the one with GSP. So I'll just copy that URI. Let's go to our documentation. We're not going to use this since we already provided with one. We can still edit the script we have to display some HTML text saying Linux startup script from Google Cloud. We can still do that. Not necessary, not important in this code lab. So yes, we can proceed to create an instance, specify the VM details. So you can use you can follow this method, which is going to you can use the console, or you can just use gcloud by running this script here, these commands, and you'll be good to go. So for just demo purposes, I'll just use the console, but a faster way of doing this is just using gcloud, so take note of that. So let's go create our instance, specify the VM details from the boot disk, select change, and then choose a Linux operating system and all that. So our bucket is ready. Create instance. Okay, I'll just leave the default name, instance1, US Central 1. Just leave everything as default except for a few. Okay, boot disk. Choose a Linux operating system. So we already have a Linux operating system here. Yeah, I think everything is fine. Default access, or we can since we need to only we can leave the default access, so it just depends on the APIs that you need, but you can specify access for each API here. If you need anything, in our case we can just go to storage and select this and disable all others, but it just depends on what you need your VM for and what that VM would be required to access. You need to give it necessary permissions. So for now I'll just go with the default access. It gives us enough to access our cloud storage bucket. So we're going to allow HTTP traffic. Okay. Okay, in the identity and API access section, select a service account that has storage object viewer role. So yeah, we can do this. Already the default permissions we applied already has this role, so we don't need to worry about that. Alright, let's do some networking configurations. Expand the networking, disks, security management, sole tenancy section. So networking, network tags, since we have assigned this, HTTP server, expand management. In the management section, add values for the following: key, metadata. So let's expand management. Okay, metadata, we can have key and value. So let's get startup script URL, that's the key. And then the value will be the location of that object in our cloud storage bucket. So let's get that bucket. Cloud storage bucket. Open a new tab. Let's open our bucket and we check out the URI for startup script. Here it is. Okay, we have that in place. Okay, to create the VM, click create. I think that is okay. We have configured all what we need, and we'll just go ahead and click on create. So while that is running, we can Connect to serial console. Connecting to serial console is not enabled for this instance. Okay, we can enable serial console. You can see our Apache server is already running. Started the Apache HTTP server. So we know our startup script executed properly, and let's check. What do we have here? 25. Confirm that the instance has been created that has a remote startup script called that. Let's check our progress. Yes. Confirm that a HTTP access firewall rule exists with the tag that applies to that virtual machine. Let's check. Alright, we're good. And then now finally connect to the server IP address using HTTP and get a non-error response. So let's check that out. Let's go get our external IP address for the instance and connect to it via HTTP. So we have our instance here, instance 1. Here it's external IP address. Let's copy that. Let's make a request. HTTP. Continue to site. And yeah, it's working. So here's the home page when you don't have any HTML documents. Here's the Apache web server homepage, the default. All right, so we can check our progress. Okay, and we're done with this code lab. You can take your time. Enough time is given for this code lab. You can take your time, read through some of the other ways you can do this. There's a lot more ways you can do this. So many ways you can use G-Cloud to make things faster. And yeah, I hope you like this video. You can leave a comment down in the comment section for any queries, any tips, anything. So don't forget to subscribe if you like this kind of content. You always find content on cloud, electronics, and some interesting stuff on here. So hit the subscribe button and see you on the next one. Bye.